Canelo Alvarez is disrespecting the sport of boxing, and the fans are letting him know. Errol Spence Jr. career, we not sure where that's going. In this video, we will discuss both those things. This is your boy JG. This is the Punch Report. Let's just get into it. Now, you guys know I like to keep the videos mostly around 8, 9, 10 minutes. This one might be a little bit longer because I'm covering two bases here. As I mentioned before, Canelo Berlanga, Errol Spence Jr., his future, Derrick James, Sebastian Fundora, and the possibility of that bout. Let's get into Canelo Berlanga right now. Now, this is a multi-layered deal, so have patience with me. It was announced yesterday. It was been long rumored, like really long rumored, like months ago, that Canelo Alvarez, after the Munguia fight, would be fighting Hector Berlanga. Now, this is not a fight that no one's really checked for or asked for. I'm just going to be honest with you. And I like Canelo. I like English-speaking Canelo because he only knows how to talk shit in English and answer a few interview questions, so that's exciting. And he does a good job at that. But, you know, he is one of the guys who has a notable legacy in the sport of boxing, dating back more than a decade at this point. Great resume. He's done his thing. He's been in there with the best of them. But at this point now, he wants us to be excited about him fighting guys that, when no one knows, are coming off long layoffs, have to be drugged way up in weight to compete, and these types of things. My large issue with Canelo is, one, the Berlanga fight's a bad fight. Straight like that. If you come to my comment section and talk shit about the pound for pound, he can do what he wants, you're right. He can do what he wants, and he is doing what he wants. But it doesn't mean that I have to accept that shit. As a consumer, I don't have to accept that. Edgar Berlanga, shout out to you. This is a bad fight. You're going to get cooked. Canelo Alvarez should not be fighting you, and there's no reason for him to be fighting you. If we look at the past of a Canelo Alvarez and some of the statements that he's made about fighters that he's opted not to fight, namely the Charlos, and now like two divisions, both of them, big Charlo, little Charlo, from 54 to 60, just denying those opportunities until you can bring a guy up to 68, and that was little Charlo. You think about the Demetrius Andrade, and then more and most importantly, David Benavidez, who is a live, I don't even want to call him a contender. He is an absolute monster. Punches and bunches, combination power, size, speed, undefeated, the real deal. And I don't like doing this. I don't like saying these words, but it's a duck. You know, he's definitely ducking David Benavidez. And the reason why I have to call it a duck is because there's way more information available in this scenario than others, right? And what do I mean by that? Canelo Alvarez is notorious for asking the question, well, what have you really done? Who have you fought? What have you done? Oh, you just beat one guy. They have a common opponent in Cayman Plant, and Canelo Alvarez loves asking that question when the name David Benavidez is brought up. Who has Edgar Berlanga fought? I only know one name on his resume off the top of my head without looking it up. That's the Angulo dude, and he dropped Berlanga. But he's getting the Canelo fight. So I think it's time for Canelo to be honest and stop asking this question of one question is, who has so-and-so fought? Because you're going to fight whoever. Who did what's his damn name? Who did Avni Yildirim fight coming off a 2-year layoff as Canelo's mandatory to get that fight? And if you guys, I'm not going to do it, but do your homework on the managers of Avni Yildirim, the WBC, and that whole setup was a nightmare. I don't want to hear any more about who have you fought when you'll fight. Canelo will probably fight me. If I beat up a couple dudes, you know, I got to gain a lot of weight, but he'll probably fight me. Meanwhile, Demetrius Andrade, before he lost, he can't get a look. And David Benavidez is undefeated right now, cooking dudes. Now David Benavidez said, I'll just go to 75. It's cool. Because I'm never going to get the Canelo fight. He's never going to fight me. And it's not for any good reason. The other aspect of the Canelo Alvarez, you know, rationale behind who have you fought or what have you done is this. You're fighting guys at this point with minimal experience. See, Canelo Alvarez understood the assignment when he was coming up the ladder. He had to fight the Canelos, he had to fight the Mayweathers. He had to fight the Austin Trouts. He had to fight the Erislandy Ladas, these guys who were dangerous. And then he ascended to a point and said, oh yeah, I'm going to do what I want to do. And so you look at these opponents, I got to give him credit. I'm not going to sit here in front and lie. The Caleb Plant bout was his last bout that was worth mentioning. If you look at that from a pay-per-view perspective, they did like, what, 880,000 or 800K or something like that, close to 1 million in buys. And that also has a lot to do with the fact that Caleb Plant really brought a lot to the table. There was a slap and all this extra shit. And Caleb Plant believed that he could win. So I look at it from a significant perspective like that. But since then, what are we talking about? Jaime Munguia with a padded resume, got absolutely cooked and carried. Shout out to Canelo, because he's still demonstrating greatness. I'm not going to front on that. He just carried Munguia and punched him around and spared him and didn't brutally stop him because he could have. I don't know if Edgar Berlanga's going to get the same love. But ultimately, this fight is not being received very well. It won't do numbers. And I've gotten to the point where anyone who's peeped my channel, you know, I don't like saying, oh, this guy's ducking or he a bitch or whatever. I don't even like doing all that, because I know what it's like to be a fighter. Even if it's just at an amateur level, you work so hard, you grind, you make weight, you sacrifice, you miss your family to go in there and get punched in the face repeatedly and possibly sustain significant neurological and brain damage just for a paycheck and glory. But as a consumer, when you command so much money, the money that Canelo commands, at some point in time, you got to get the fans what they want. And Canelo Alvarez has demonstrated through his actions that he's not willing to do that. Andrade is a champion undefeated. He can't get the fight. David Benavidez, he's undefeated cooking people. He can't get the fight. Charlos can't get the fight. We can't get no rematches against tough draws like Erislandy Lara. We can't get none of that. You waited, the trilogy for Triple G, you waited way too long. He looked bad. He beat up Yoshino, whoever he beat up and cooked. And honestly, I did a breakdown video for that fight, and I said, Canelo Alvarez will stop Golovkin to the body. You went the distance, giving hugs and shit like that. That was charity. And now you're fighting Edgar Berlanga. And you see the poster up at the Battle of Mexico and Puerto Rico. So stop. 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 Don't do that. We're not checking for that. Shout out to Canelo, though. He's a good fighter. He's just operating on his time. I guess if you put in enough time in the sport of boxing, you generate enough revenue, you make smart business decisions and moves, you can just do bullshit fights and just fight motherfuckers in the stands. Excuse my language. Shout out to you. What's up, Mom? Moving right along, though. Shout out to Canelo. Shout out to Berlanga. Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. Sebastian Fundora. Fundora came away with a victory against Tim Tszyu. Some say that, you know, minus the cut that Tim Tszyu sustained, that he would have won the fight. You know, I think that there's some credence to that, but that's not how the fight went, so we're not going to play around with that. After the fight, immediately, Errol Spence enters the ring, straps he's a man down. You know, I'm trying to see what's up, Tower Inferno, blah, blah, blah. All right, cool, sounds great. We know that there's beef and turmoil and things happening in the background with Errol Spence and Derek James. There's litigation, lawsuits have been filed, countersuits, and this is where it gets sticky, right? Errol Spence Jr. is one without a trainer. He's in a legal battle, and there's a lot of unknowns about where he's at. And I'm going to be upfront with you. Errol Spence Jr., from a personal perspective, probably one of my favorite fighters. Straight like that. So to see him in this position, it kills me. Like, this shit is dumb as fuck. And when I think about before everything fell out, when it was just rumors, I said, how do you come this far with a trainer, that and Derek James, achieve what you've achieved, climb this ladder, you lose bad to Crawford, take a beating, and it was all good just a week ago, right? Now we've fallen out. $2.1 million is what's to be litigated over. And as of me recording this video, I don't know if Errol Spence Jr. even has a trainer. I don't follow on social media very closely, just to be honest with you. And I don't check for these particulars when it comes to who signed who. But there's been rumors. Calvin Ford was rumored to be a guy in consideration for the lead trainer for Errol Spence Jr. That's since been debunked. It was rumored that Roy Jones Jr. would get that role. I haven't really heard much to solidify or corroborate that, so I'm not going with that. But the supposed bout between Errol Spence Jr. and Sebastian Fundora was scheduled for October, November time. It's almost August at this point. So they've run out of time, in my humble opinion. And just the history of Errol Spence Jr., for me, that doesn't sit well because of lack of discipline, history of injuries, inconsistencies in training based on those injuries, and there's a lot of unknowns. Now, the caveat or flip side of that is we know that Errol Spence Jr. largely has operated in the shadows and had a successful career, a 3-belt champion at 147, and then fought Terrence Bud Crawford, and what many of us expected to be a really great fight at 147 between two historic welterweights, and it was a one-sided ass whooping, which is fine. Sometimes, you just, a cat got your number. But even at this point, I don't see the clear path for success moving forward for Errol Spence Jr. without some level of, and he's already done a lot of this, sacrifice or contrition, getting back into a position where he's heavily sought after. His fan base is crazy, and I'm one of them. He's always going to generate a good crowd, and people are going to be excited to see him compete. But the business side of things, a place where he's operated pretty successfully for the majority of his career, at this juncture right now, I think he's making some questionable decisions. Like I mentioned before, the Errol Spence Jr., Derrick James shit, that hurts. Like, I know him. Falling outs happen. I definitely get that. I think the amount of money that's on the table, 2.1 mil, I'll pay out and just go our separate ways and put myself in a position to hire a new trainer and get some things worked out. It was rumored that this fight was in question. Errol Spence Jr., I believe today, came out and said everything's still a go. We're working out minor details, but the lack of certainty and having to answer certain questions in that manner definitely gives me some level of pause. I'm just going to be honest. I'm interested to see what's next for Errol Spence Jr. His plan is Fundora sometime in the fall, and then running it back with Bud Crawford. It likely at 54. He's fighting Madrimov, obviously at 54, that being Bud Crawford. But I just have a lot of questions and a lot of concerns for the state of Errol Spence Jr. generally and the state of his career and kind of the decisions that are being made. Because I think, and I've not heard anyone else say this, but I feel like sometimes Errol Spence Jr. looks at how Bud Crawford moved and was kind of able to fight an Avanesian for $10 million and have fucked up gloves and then knock him out and then get the Errol Spence fight thereafter. Now he's fighting Israel Madrimov on the Riyadh season card after the Errol Spence fight, and he's going to get it back then. And so Errol Spence says, I can kind of operate on my own. But the key difference between Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Bud Crawford, I believe that Errol Spence Jr. is probably a more business savvy guy, but Terrence Bud Crawford has way more discipline. He's not going to put himself in a position where he's getting cooked or knocked around or whatever. He's always going to be in shape. Even if the business acumen is not what you're checking for, Bud Crawford, whatever situation he gets himself into, when he gets into the squared circle, he's going to deliver. Might not sell the best, might not be the best businessman, but he ain't going to go get rolled over by somebody because he lacked discipline. In fairness to Errol Spence Jr., what I would say is, if you take the beating from Bud Crawford away, he's dealt with so much injury and damage, the car accident, surgery. He had, last year? After the Bud Crawford fight, he had another eye surgery, retina surgery. I think those things are adding up. He turned 34, I believe, in March. So still a young man, but in the sport of boxing or combat sports generally, he has additional damage put on him. If it was just the Bud Crawford beating, I would be super high on Errol still and think that he can go out and still snatch up a couple belts. But it's compounded by the other things. The Bud Crawford beating doesn't help. So I'm interested to see what happens next. Guys, let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are, what your questions are. Shout out to Canelo, shout out to Berlanga, Errol Spence Jr., and whoever he fights next, if he fights again, and his future coach. Shout out to Sebastian Fundora. This has been the Punch Report. This is your boy JG. Like, subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified. If you made it this far, you definitely a real one. Let me know what you guys are thinking. All right, we out.